Let me take you back to the winter of 1995, a cold, foggy night in Essex, England. On a lonely farm track, just past midnight, a dark blue Range Rover sat quietly, headlights cutting through the mist. Inside were three men, men who believed they were untouchable, men who had risen high in the ruthless world of drugs, money, and nightclubs. But before dawn broke, all three would be dead, executed in one of the most infamous gangland killings in British history. This is the story of the Rettendon Murders. The victims were not ordinary men. They were the faces of Essex nightlife and the booming rave scene of the 1990s. First, there was Anthony "Tony" Tucker. At 38, Tony was a nightclub doorman, a bodyguard to celebrities, and the man everyone knew had a hand in the drug trade. He was feared, respected, and obsessed with control. Then, Tate, a giant of a man, 37 years old, a bodybuilder with muscles to match his explosive temper. Tate had just come out of prison, hungry to make his mark again. He wasn't just dangerous, he was unpredictable. And finally, Craig Rolfe, the youngest of the three at 26. Loyal to Tony, always the sidekick, but just as deep in the business. Together, they formed the backbone of Essex's ecstasy empire. In the rave-fueled 90s, one pill could fetch 20 pounds or more. And with nightclubs packed, their pockets were overflowing. They lived like kings, but kings in a world where betrayal was only ever one deal away. On the night of December 6, 1995, the three men thought they were heading to a business meeting. They climbed into their Range Rover, rolled down the quiet lanes of Rettendon, and made their way to a remote farm track. The deal, they believed, was about a massive shipment of drugs. A deal that would make them even richer. But what they didn't know was that this was no meeting. It was a trap. Somewhere in that dark countryside, someone was waiting with a shotgun. The next morning, as the sun rose weakly over Essex, a farmer walking his land stumbled on a horrifying sight. There, parked in the mud, was the Range Rover. Its windows shattered, doors locked. And inside, three men slumped lifeless, their bodies riddled with shotgun blasts. The once feared Essex boys had been silenced. The crime scene was so brutal, newspapers instantly dubbed it a massacre. Three notorious gangsters, executed in cold blood in the dead of night. Whoever did it hadn't just killed them, they had sent a message. The police were thrown into chaos. The murders weren't random. They screamed of gangland retribution. But in a world where everyone lies, where money and drugs blur the truth, who could they trust? Rumors spread fast. Some said it was a rival gang. Others whispered about unpaid debts, betrayal, or a double cross in the drug trade. But one man would soon change everything. His name was Darren Nichols, a low-level criminal, a driver. Nichols claimed he had chauffeured two men on the night of the murders, Michael Steele and Jack Holmes. According to Darren, Steele and Holmes had lured Tony, Pat, and Craig to the farm track. Once the Range Rover stopped, Steele opened fire at point-blank range. It was swift, silent, and merciless. His testimony was the breakthrough police needed. In 1998, 3 years after the massacre, Michael Steele and Jack Holmes stood trial for the Rettendon Murders. The case captivated the nation. Courtrooms were packed. Journalists scrambled for every detail. Prosecutors painted Steele as the mastermind, the man who orchestrated the ambush. Holmes was his right hand. Darren Nichols, the driver, was the star witness. After months of evidence, both Steele and Holmes were found guilty. Life sentences. Justice, at least, on paper. But here's the twist. Even today, many believe Steele and Holmes were innocent. Critics argue Darren Nichols was unreliable, a man who saved himself by spinning a story. Others suggest corrupt police officers were involved. And some point fingers at rival dealers, powerful men higher up in the chain who wanted the Essex boys gone for good. Theories swirl. Was it revenge? A double cross? Or something much darker, hidden by those in power? The truth remains buried in the fog of that Essex night. The Rettendon Murders didn't just end 3 lives. They reshaped the underworld. They terrified gangsters, inspired endless speculation, and burned themselves into British true crime history. Books were written. Films were made. Documentaries keep revisiting the case. The names Tony Tucker, Tate, and Craig Rolfe became legend. But behind the legend lies a cold fact. 3 men, who once thought they ruled Essex, died alone in a freezing Range Rover. Their empire gone in seconds. And the killers? whether truly Steele and Holmes or someone else entirely, walked away unseen into the night. To this day, the Rettendon murders remain one of Britain's most infamous unsolved mysteries of the underworld. Not because the case wasn't closed, but because, even with convictions, the truth feels slippery, hidden, dangerous, and perhaps that's exactly how those who pulled the trigger wanted it.